Welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello Esquire, Evan Ginzburg, and Mike Lano. So, no other guests tonight, but, you know, it seems like a full house after having either Mike or Evan missing for the last few weeks. It's nice to have all three of us here for the whole show. So that's a plus. So how are you guys doing?
I was just down at legendary Wo Hop restaurant in Chinatown with our friend Jim Phillips from Pro Wrestling Stories and Nia Kennedy, noted lady wrestler, and Bobby C from Team Splendid and Bobby C's lovely girlfriend. And yeah, it was nice going out with some friends after 2 years of house arrest with COVID.
And they're saying we're going to have a surge in mandates in LA and Orange County, California. But Ev, you had sent us an email about a concert, I think like towards Fresno or mid-California. But listen to this. It's that and even more. May 20th at the LA County Fair. Listen to this lineup. So it's a 5-hour concert. Brothers Johnson, Rose Royce, Ohio Players, The Emotions, Spinners, Stylistics, Manhattans, with MC, and he's going to do a set, Michael Winslow, the sound effects genius.
That anywhere near you guys?
That one was near me. That's about an hour away. So if stuff is safe, how could you miss that? I mean,
I want to miss that.
Ohio Players. I don't know how many.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of these members of the bands have died recently, so you know.
Well, Ev would know. In the Brothers Johnson and Ohio Players, Ev, are most of the original guys still around? Or
Brothers Johnson, one of the brothers is dead. The other is the original guy. Ohio Players, the lead Sugarfoot is dead, but a lot of the other guys, you know, are original guys. I mean, these are still virtuoso musicians. You're going to hear great music. It's like saying the Spinners aren't real because a bunch of them are dead, but they started in the 50s. So, you know, they have one original member and the other guys are replacements, but they're still going to sound great. So, you know, what can you do? These bands have been around since the 50s, and, you know, a lot of the original members just aren't alive anymore. It doesn't negate their being worth seeing. And to this day, I'd go see any of those acts, particularly the Stylistics, who headline in New York all the time. And yeah, it's some original members and some replacements, and the music's still beautiful. So I'm not a purist in that sense. You know, you're not going to see the original Platters from 1955. Do the math.
Oh, you're right, exactly.
Do the math.
Michael Winslow, I would go to see him. I was happy to see he was brought on for whatever reason last year on America's Got Talent, and he can still do all of those effects. And this guy's had some tragedy in his life. He seems like a really good guy. But you remember him from, what did he do? He was in all the Police Academy movies?
Yeah, he was in all the Police Academy movies, and he's done his own stand-up. And the guy's an interesting talent, a unique talent, and it would be fun just to watch him, you know, between sets. And yeah, I would go to that in a minute if it wasn't 3,000 miles away.
And it's still a good 500 miles away.
That's about as strong a lineup as I've heard in many years, you know, since when they have these mega 1 or 2 day all-star concerts with Van Halen and a zillion other acts, ZZ Top and stuff like that.
We get the 70s Soul Jam, and the Stylistics always headline, and there's 4 or 5 other acts with them. And they play, you know, medium seat venues like the Beacon Theater, you know, 2,300 seats, and they'll do an afternoon show and an evening show. So, you know, they still draw these acts to some degree.
Of course, the real big news around here is that Elton John is having his final concert in October. So
he's playing outdoor stadiums, and I was pleasantly surprised that you could get in for as little as $55, which, you know, is pretty reasonable considering. You know, considering what some of these guys are
the
getting.
most famous concert, at least in the States, like whatever year it was, I think it was 75, Dodger Stadium, where he put on the sequin Dodger baseball outfit, did the whole Yellow Brick Road, the 2 double album, did the whole thing from start to finish. And, you know, he had the Eagles and Emmylou Harris open for him. And that was when, you know, because of all the drugs or whatever, allegedly, he's done to his voice, he, you know, croaks it out now. It's not like he can't, you know, you don't expect somebody from the 70s now to be able to hit the high notes, but he doesn't sound at all, you know. So I'm torn between wanting to go see him, you know, to finish things up at where, I mean, that was where he really hit it. After the Troubadour, he was discovered at the small club like Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. And then when he really got going worldwide, this was like one of the early big outdoor stadium things. Obviously the Beatles did it first, but man, he was in full voice then, so it would be hard for me to go and see him and listen to him now. I've watched a million times the concert he did at Madison Square Garden from about 10 years ago, and that's when the voice started going.
Little Anthony from the 1950s can still hit the high notes from the 1950s.
Yeah,
so
well,
it depends on the artist, really.
Well, he took care of himself, whereas Elton John, you know, was very open about having hit rock bottom, and then when he met and helped that poor kid Ryan something that had AIDS, that's when he and died of AIDS. That's when he decided to go, you know, sober and rehab and do all that stuff from drugs and alcohol. But it's a shame that it ruined his voice. You know, there are a lot, but seeing an oldies act, I know we're a little off wrestling topic, but went and saw a bunch of, you know, the Turtles, Flo and Eddie. They get all kinds of great old acts together, and Three Dog Night, but they had Jerry Lewis's son Gary, and he is, if anybody's worse at croaking out stuff, it's poor Gary Lewis, unless, you know, he's covered by Backtrack and stuff like that. He just can't sing. And I heard even well, there's some other acts, but
well,
you know,
but it doesn't. It's not totally unrelated to wrestling, because, you know, we just got done with Wrestlemania, and that featured a number of old acts as well that, you know, are still trying to.
And what did you think of Steve Austin? I just have seen the clips so far. I haven't sadly watched that. The person
I was actually pleasantly surprised. Sure, he lost a step or two, but the whole thing worked. The match was an excellent brawl. It went 13 minutes. It wasn't just an angle. It was a legitimate match. It actually went longer than Roman Reigns' match in the main event. You know,
that's pretty incredible, right?
Yeah. So my expectations were basically he would come out and, you know, do an angle, and it would be over, and it would be wildly beyond what anybody could have hoped for. And it was actually a good brawl. I had no problem with that at all. I did not appreciate the Johnny Knoxville Sami Zayn match, and ironically, I liked Jackass Forever. I enjoyed it. I just don't think the two worlds mesh.
No.
You know, wrestling is not a live action cartoon, and you know, humor is subjective. And I've seen people say Chris Rock isn't funny, and I'm like, you're insane. He's top 10 all-time comedian, maybe top 5. So, you know, what people find funny is always going to vary, but I want to see Sami Zayn have a great match like he did in ROH. Once it crosses that line to he's just a comedy figure, and he rarely, if ever, has quality, you know, excellent matches anymore, I think they've taken it too far. So you can do both. You can do both. You don't have to go total buffoon. I'm sorry.
My impression was that you felt the second night was not as good as the first night.
Wasn't close. It was, the second night was typical pablum, and the first night was really excellent. It was two different. It was night and day.
Would you say like two women? Wasn't it nuts? I guess, you know, how are you going to follow Austin? But really, the main event was supposed to have been Charlotte, one of the two women's matches, say Charlotte and Ronda. And they did not, they have yet again the 2 nights of main, even though they kept saying in all the press that Flair's daughter, Ashley, aka Charlotte, said was that she was the main event. And then it turned out, unless you're going to call them all main events, but that was kind of sad. I think a lot of people have been saying that Ronda, just since motherhood happened, she just does not have any enthusiasm for this, and maybe she's having to fulfill the contract, but she doesn't appear. So what did you think of that match? I don't think we got into that last week.
It followed Rollins and Cody. It followed Becky and Bianca, and it just wasn't as good. And it had a screw job finish. So, it just wasn't as good a match. Simple as that. And it didn't feel like a main event. And, basically it was an okay match. It wasn't anything special that I'll remember or savor years from now. And you see, this is the thing that bothered me about the whole weekend. There was nothing on either WrestleMania show that touched the Briscoes and FTR and Ring of Honor, which was performed in front of 2,000 people. 2,000 people, not 77 or 78,000 a night. So the WWE fanboys, of course, will go, well, it's all about the money. It's all about the gate. And I'm like, no, it's about the art. And, to me, it's always about creating art. And, you can make a great movie, or you can make the Marines 17 for WWE Pictures. It's all a choice. And I watched the movie last night called Sophie Jones for Oscilloscope Films, and it was shot on pennies. And it was just a beautiful, great film shot on nothing. And you could spend $100 million on Pluto Nash or some Will Smith action movie, and it's utter crap. So, it's not always about money. I'm sorry. And it's very disillusioning as someone who's older. I just celebrated my 107th birthday, and to hear young people, it's all about the money. It's all about the stock prices. I'm like, oh man, it's like, please don't breed and teach your kids this stuff. It's horrible. Horrible.
Listen to this. So interjecting just for a second, we'll go back to WWE. This coming week in AEW, I think it's on Dark. It really should be on TV. They're having Lufisto, female legend from Canada, start. She's going to be with Emi Sakura and the Bunny, who everybody remembers from Impact, against Ruby Soho, and it looks like a whole grouping. So it's a huge match. Plus, dream match: Minoru Suzuki, who now has a Ring of Honor championship, against Samoa Joe on Dynamite for Suzuki's Ring of Honor TV title.
I'm glad you mentioned this. So this is exactly what I'm saying. I want to see Suzuki and Samoa Joe. I don't care one iota to see Cody and The Miz. I have no need to see that. So you could say a zillion more people are going to watch Cody and The Miz. You could say the gate is 10 times more for Cody and The Miz. But I want to see art. I want to see Suzuki and Samoa Joe. It's simple as that. I'm sorry. And I'm not doing the AEW versus WWE war thing, because I just said before,
they're apples and oranges. They're two different entities completely.
And the first night of WrestleMania was actually quite good, very good, even excellent. There were 5 3.5 to 4-star matches. So it's not me being anti-WWE. It's about me always wanting to see a great match. So today some fans...
But the WWE makes it hard on itself when it does 2 consecutive nights of 4-hour shows plus 2 hours.
The reason for that, Russ, is because a couple of years ago, before COVID hit, they had like a 7 to 7.5 hour, 8 hour Mania, and people were just burned out. People were leaving early, so they decided to split it into two, and with each show being at least 4 hours. So,
how hard is it? How hard is it with one of the greatest talent bases in history to put on 2 good nights of wrestling? Crockett Promotion put on 30 good nights of wrestling every month. Back in the 80s. I mean, come on.
They didn't do 2 4-hour shows back to back. They didn't. They would put on,
what is called the loop, where the same guys work with each other in different towns. This was before the sheets really, or the internet started ruining things.
They put on 3.5 hour shows. They were legitimate shows.
But they weren't all chained together in one pay-per-view or 2 pay-per-views.
Not chained together, but they might work 27 consecutive or 27 days out of 30.
But the fans hadn't seen every one of those matches, as you pointed out. Those were house shows.
The thing, of course, briefly, is just that style, because when they send them all to NXT and they train them WWE style, they neuter somebody who's a total artist, as Evan said, like Kushida, New Japan total legend. He's just languishing in their NXT. Or Nakamura, where when you've seen one of his wrestling WWE style matches, you've seen them all. How can I fast forward through Nakamura's matches because he's not the New Japan Nakamura, and that's
painful to watch him.
Criminal. So
nobody so far has come from New Japan to the WWE and upped their game. Everyone that comes to the WWE from New Japan is lowered, has been made to be a clown and made to look.
Clown, but they neuter them to where they ruined Awesome Kong from Impact TNA.
Correct.
Ruined Mystico, the original first Mystico. Ruined him. How many guys they brought up last week? Oh, right. If we're going to shit on them, let's go full tilt. They're bringing up the I don't know what you want to call them, but they're obviously very overtly German from NXT. Walter, who was a terrific wrestler, they made him drop like at least 50 pounds. So now he looks kind of fragile, whereas before he was a Frankenstein monster, legit. And he had to take on this German Gestapo Gunther name. They bring up one of his other guys from Imperium, and now he's got some total Nazi-sounding name. It's a mess, and you watch. He won't be wrestling. I mean, they ruined
Gallows and Anderson, and
they ruined him when they brought him aboard. They lost his whole entrance. I mean, they just ruined that guy's act. They ruined Keith Lee. So, it's that style you're sort of stuck with. I mean, Evans saw about a zillion. He wasn't Seth Rollins then. He was what was his name? Black.
Tyler Black.
Tyler Black. I'm sure he was doing far more stuff. I mean,
Seth Rollins is a consistently good, very good, and excellent performer. The problem at this point with him is it's very clear that Roman Reigns is Vince's guy. Roman Reigns has the Cena-like push. Roman Reigns is not going to lose to Seth Rollins. And that's it. I mean, so there's no suspense. They don't need to wrestle each other anymore. So, it's like he kind of is diminished because he's not that elite level guy like Roman Reigns. And
they need to elevate guys. Look at A&E where everybody is important. I mean, there's tiers there, but everybody seems to have importance. Everybody is over, and that's not the case. When you take a guy who originally came from NXT, this guy Crowbar, he was having fantastic 4.5-star matches with Keith Lee and in NXT, and then they bring him up and they make him wear the mask and be part of the crappy stuff, and they just ruin the guy to where he has no credibility. And AEW, it's different. I mean, those shows are just night and day. And Russ, I hope you watch A&E because they're exciting shows top to bottom.
AEW. Arts Entertainment is. AEW. I do watch A&E every once in a while.
Yeah.
But
AEW, top to bottom, are pretty amazing. Well, on the A&E front, I'm thinking about them because I'm getting involved. I was hit up for several documentaries coming up. They did I don't know how many WWE guys, 7 or 8, including the Bret Hart one, etc. I was supplied photos for the Booker and Piper ones, but they've got like 32 for next season. So a small amount, great. And they were, for the most part, except the Ultimate Warrior, they were worth watching. And now with way too many, I don't know, that's going to burn out stuff. And they're going to have that other secondary show, Lost or Hidden Treasures, Lost Treasures, a ton of episodes, way more than the first season.
I'm looking forward to the A&E biography on Shamel, the Hall of Famer. I think that should be a well-spent 2 hours.
Where's my buddy Sotello A&E documentary? That's what I want.
The Hall of Fame should have just been on one guy. It should have just been on Undertaker, and it
should have been on Ivan Koloff and make Undertaker wait.
But there's some weird heat there to where Bruno was pissed at Vince for many, many years and kept pushing. And Ivan, definitely should have been in there. But the Steiner's long overdue. But I mean,
what do you think about the push of his son right now? Now that they're pushing his son.
I watch NXT every week without fail, and the kid is good, but I'm not into that kind of style of sort of the jacked guy. I'm more into, and he channels both his uncle and his dad, but he's not for me. Again, I would rather watch Minoru Suzuki against anybody, and a dream match against Bryan Danielson was. Evan knows I've raved on a weekly basis nearly about that. Now I can't wait to see.
Why do you think they've gone with the name Braun Breaker with him when,
His first name is Bronson Rick Steiner. His full name is Bronson Rick Steiner.
So why don't they make him Braun Steiner?
Braun Steiner. I know it's stupid. Well, come on with the names.
Because Breaker is more juvenile and will appeal to the 8-year-olds that they cater to. Or the adults that are mentally 8 years old that they cater to.
That's the thing. I've been writing a number of pieces for months to where all of the female announcers, except for Kayla, have first letter of first name and last name exactly the same. And that's like a Vince Jr. alleged principle. Keep it simple. So Braun Breaker, BB. And they changed. They had 3 people debut in SmackDown, all with different names. The guy that was part of Imperium, his name changed. But Raquel Gonzalez, who's a killer, she's like an Andre the Giant female. No, she has to be Raquel Rodriguez. And they've had her for 2 years in NXT as Raquel Gonzalez. That base already knows her set. They must be throwing up their hands with, like, what is this stupid shit? The name changes are unnecessary, and I don't think there are more people will recall them more if first and last name have the same starting letter. It's stupid.
I think they should dumb it down even more and make it like Boom Boom Breaker, or Break Things Bob, or
Ham.
Really dumb it down.
Ham.
Have you seen?
What's
that?
Pleasure.
Him.
About this. They have this.
Make the wrestler just name him him. They already had a Who, so
right.
they could just have him and that guy.
You had Woman, which is crazy, but Wendy Chu, they call her Sleepy Wendy Chu. I've talked about her before. She is a guilty pleasure on NXT. She comes out wearing fluffy slippers, pajamas, a bathrobe she takes off. She does this gimmick where she'll put her head, if you can see me, down her hands, and then crashes down on somebody. Why they do not have, and I got into this discussion with Bully Ray on Busted Open, why they do not have her finishing move, the sleeper, when she, she dozes off in the ring laying down, and then she comes to life instantly. So her whole gimmick is being, a sleeper, sleepy time Wendy. And they have not given her that finisher. How could you miss the boat on that? Although the problem is the sleeper, like so many great moves, like Harley Race's suplex, they're transition moves. They're not finishers.
Yes. Yeah,
most WWE content will put you to sleep. It's really appropriate. I think they should push that harder.
Make her the head of promotions.
When you see her wearing fluffy bunny slippers and she's wrestling in those things instead of boots.
I'm going to wear fluffy bunny slippers and watch WWE TV. It'll get me to sleep easier.
I tell you, I have a massage chair, for my back. I have a pretty bad back. When I get in there and turn on their show, I fall asleep, and I got to rewind the thing to see. I got to keep rewinding it because I'm falling asleep.
And that's without the bunny slippers.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anyone watched Raw after WrestleMania.
I watched the last episode I watched was in 2017.
Well, I always kind of am interested in tuning into Raw after a major WWE pay-per-view to try to see how they're going to like recover from the aftermath of a big event. And I got to tell you, they had a tag team match that ended at about 10:45 here on the West Coast. So
you got to get one of the satellites so you can watch it 3 hours early.
No, thank you.
Hey,
I know that
I'm not going to watch till 11 o'clock at night. That's crazy.
You know what? That's always where Raw has been in my life. It's always been from that.
It made it easy for me because I had cable satellite during the Monday Night War, so I could have Nitro on, and then flip to Raw and watch. So that's when I was doing that.
But my point was this: is that after you kind of do the math, you go, okay, there's going to be an interview with Roman Reigns, and you go, okay, the tag team match, featuring Street Profits against the Alpha Club. That finished about 10:45, and you're like, well, there's not going to be any action with Roman Reigns because you do the math. You go, there's going to be about 8
all
minutes.
that was a Roman Reigns commercial to watch Friday for SmackDown to see what I'm really going to say about this.
Yes, and so I was just like, what an amazing waste of a quarter of an hour where you used to.
Everybody said that was one of the weirdest post WrestleMania Raws, because usually there's a lot of enthusiasm. There's people, particularly the Brits, the people from Europe, they go crazy. They start their own chants. They make it entertaining. They're more entertaining than the wrestling product. And they sort of did that, and they were booing people they shouldn't have been booing. It was awesome, because they're in control. Vince can't control that or his people, other than to tell them to sit down. That's the problem. And Bully Ray and Mark Henry and Tommy Dreamer and a lot of others have been vocal about that, is at WWE house shows and TV, they keep telling people, sit down, sit in your seat. Whereas at AEW, people can have fun. That's what you go into a concert, and you can't stand up and have fun and, dance or do whatever.
They got too used to those television sets. In the having the television sets and an audience, instead of actual people,
But here's something, and I don't know if it was said on TV, but I've said it for years. Usually the Monday after Raw, the Raw after WrestleMania is a reset. It's like season premiere. So the season, because WWE is 52 weeks.
Blown off all those feuds. It's time to start the new ones.
So we had the turns. We had the Happy Corbin sort of turn.
Nobody liked that. There's not one. I haven't met one person yet who likes Happy Corbin.
Happy Corbin makes me sad.
I know, that's what most people.
But the guy he turned on is Madcap Moss. I forgot that guy. What's his name? Derek Moss or something. He's an athlete from another sport. So that's what they're not going for indie guys and bringing them into developmental. Now they're going for amateur basketball players and this and that. So that guy's a quality athlete.
Johnny Knoxville, Bad Bunny.
Oh, that's not a quality athlete, but
I know, but that's what they're going for now. Those guys are draw and in some ways, some of them looked as good in the ring as the guys that are going.
If you watch NXT, and a lot of people have criticism about that they're not even using the normal camera techniques to hide the fact that they're calling spots and talking very loudly to each other. You got to watch that to believe it. And they have a African American female who is a big time amateur basketball player. She's the absolute shits in the ring. She had a match against this one, Nikita Lyons, who was in Dave McClain's WOW that was on Access Channel about 3 years ago. And she, you wouldn't really spend much time watching her, but she's vastly improved. She could
hit a 3-pointer though.
But she had a match with this African American basketball player who they were giving her gimmick was she was like a Wendy Williams having a stupid talk show, in front of just other NXT, but they were acting like it was a real audience. But it's just some of the NXT trainees, so maybe 12 people as the audience. And then they finally put her in the ring, and she was the absolute drizzling shits. She just was terrible, and so she's being reworked, and the talk show's not on, and it's the usual with them. But some of these women, they have the that faction where they hold all the titles. They've never yet had the two heels that they just threw out there. When they got rid of the black and gold NXT, which was very good with the Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano and all of those greats, it was really super incredible to watch. And that was when they were having the Wednesday Night Wars. They lost. They decided to just have it go back to a farm system now and got rid of all of Hunter's people, which was a real shame. But they threw all those people out at once, and nobody's fully digested them. So the women tag champs with Mandy Rose as the head, that's the faction, the three of them together. They never have let them talk on TV. You don't know their backstory. Nothing. They just came out of the blue, and within a couple of weeks, they were women's tag champions for NXT. And it sucks. And they're the ones, doing a lot of talking in the ring. They've improved quickly, but there's a lot of people that don't belong, as you guys have both called them, not ready for primetime players, meaning some of these workers on NXT. It's a mess compared to the phenomenal, Adam Cole, all of these guys, all gone. And Ciampa is either going to be hopefully brought up to the main roster, or he's going to be out of there. Another loss, another gain to AEW. When you see the people that they're bringing in, and Toni Storm from NXT called up to the roster, and then she was in an embarrassing thing, having to put over Charlotte Flair, not get in any offense, take a pie to the face for a quality athlete who they had win the inaugural Mae Young Cup thing, and then they have her taking a pie in the face, bringing her up to the roster. That's why, and she quit. She asked for her release. Like Cesaro did. A guy, how many times did you bring him on Legends? Cesaro is Claudio. Many times. This guy is an ultimate professional. And I would love to see him go to AEW and join that William Regal.
He just re-signed, didn't he?
No, he quit. He asked for his release. Cesaro's gone.
When was this? I didn't hear this.
Recently, in the last...
Yeah, it did just happen.
Oh, it just happened. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a real loss.
That's good news. That's good news.
Hey, you go right to AEW, where he'll be the Claudio of old.
Wow.
I can't wait. And if he and Serena Deeb are if they add them to the Bryan Danielson Moxley group with William Steve Regal sort of running it, that would be incredible.
I think Cesaro should have stayed and got pies thrown in his face. I think he made the wrong move.
They were not too far away from either that or bringing back Doink and making Cesaro the new Doink.
Cesaro lost a handicap match. His partner got hurt in one match. The guy lost a handicap match. It was insane.
Well, you know what? It's not the wrestler's fault. Certainly not the wrestler's fault. It's I think the bookers, wherever they're getting these bookers, and maybe Michael Hayes and Bruce Pritchard are getting long in the tooth. I hate to say it, both good guys and stuff, but maybe they've been in that environment way too long. Although Pritchard, was quite a few years in Impact and at TNA and all of that stuff, but they need to get some more wrestling people. The Dean Malenkos, all of these folks that were agents that left and went to AEW. They're missing Arn Anderson, a guy with some input that would say, this is shit. He would probably say that at a booking meeting.
Yeah, it's coming back to me because it's such a nightmare, like I blot it out sometimes. But Sheamus's partner got hurt. So Sheamus was wrestling Ricochet and Cesaro, and Sheamus beat both of them. And I'm just like, oh my God, these guys have to leave. They have to know exactly where they stand, because it's embarrassing at this point. And speaking of which, at WrestleMania, they had no spots for Finn Balor. No spots. Like he wasn't good enough to
defend the Intercontinental Championship.
The IC and the U.S. title.
Yeah.
They take time. And a guy like Finn Balor you could have had a dream match with quite a few people with him. You could have brought, I mean, as good as the Seth Rollins thing, I would love to see Cody maybe against the Finn Balor or something like that, but let them go. Don't force that WWE style on them. And before I forget, we didn't get to this wrestling myself last week. I wanted to ask, he said Wrestlemania 2 in LA the only Wrestlemania you've been to?
Yes.
Tell us a little about that.
Yes. Although for Wrestlemania 1, that was the only thing that I've ever seen in my life on a closed circuit broadcast.
You were at Bill Graham Civic, weren't you?
Yep, I was at the Bill Graham
Civic front row, and the local papers interviewed us, the San Francisco Chronicle and the Oakland Tribune, and we had some quotes on that very first WrestleMania. That was fun. It was fun seeing it. Ev, did you go to that, or did you go to closed circuit, or what did you do for WrestleMania?
I saw it, I believe, at a friend's house. I don't think I saw it on closed circuit.
It wasn't available pay-per-view.
Even better.
I don't remember. It was so long ago. I mean, I remember seeing it because I know Hogan and Andre was such a big deal. Or was that 3? That was 3. The first one was with Piper and Mr. T and the tag match. Yeah. I don't remember, honestly. I don't remember. I didn't see it live. I didn't go to the actual event.
Okay. Well, Russ, how did you end up going? Your dad took you to wrestling?
No. My dad hated wrestling, and I never saw a match with my dad. He was a fan of wrestling from the 40s, and his favorite wrestler was Antonino Rocco. But he was always of the mentality that, like, well, you got to grow. When you grow up, you grow out of all this stuff. So I was to no longer associate with comic books and wrestling and science fiction. I was supposed to graduate from all that stuff and start loving opera and I, Claudius and like all this erudite stuff. I was
what's I, Claudius? You talking theater?
Yeah, Masterpiece Theater. I was supposed to, watch 60 Minutes, Masterpiece Theater, become, all serious and all adult-like. And
why can't you have all of that? Evan and I.
Why can't you do both?
We have our art side.
Because my dad turned me off from all that stuff because he said I had to choose between one or the other. And I said, I'm staying with wrestling. I'm staying with the stuff that
I don't have to choose between peanut butter and chocolate.
Yeah, my dad made it a choice, and so no, the only person in my family that has ever really been there step for step for me in a wrestling sense is my brother, and so my brother went to UCLA. Now he was going to UCLA, and I went to UC San Diego, and when he heard that tickets were available for Wrestlemania 2. He drove over to the LA Coliseum, the sports arena, and just picked up 2 tickets. I believe they were less than $25. I think they were like $12 for each, $12.50 for each ticket. Now we were at the very, 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 very top of the LA sports arena. We were like 3 rows from the actual like top part of the. And man, that was when you could still smoke inside the arena. So there was like a cloud of all sorts of various burned substances at the very top of that arena. It was.
Wait, so what were the matches? Because we only saw the cage match, the big main event, Bundy and Hogan, and what was the other big match there? Was that where the
Battle Royale with the sports players and Andre the Giant?
But there were more matches, or were you getting piped in on the screen? The other
they did have the other matches from the other parts of the country on the screen at the time, and then there really only were like about maybe 4 live matches in LA, or maybe like
the other 2 that you saw. So there was.
Man, I'm trying to think. I think it was. And it's a tough one to remember because now that so many, of course, the big blue cage match with Hogan and Bundy.
And I told you that was the Blassie cage. So Mike LaBelle sold the office to Vince Jr. in December of '82, well before Vince went national. A lot of people don't know that, but part of the office sale was the Blassie blue cage. We called it the Freddie Blassie cage because he had all his matches against the Sheik when he turned babyface in 1970, and then against, of course, Tolis in that Blassie cage, and quite a few other matches when he'd return. But that was the Blassie cage, the blue one. And
yeah, I was never a big fan of the blue cage, and I never really liked the idea of the WWE matches, the WWF matches, where you had to climb out of the cage to win.
That was the deal. Their laziness was, and Evans saw that with the first cage match at Madison Square Garden, you could either climb up and over, which is more difficult for the boys, or exit the door, which was dumb. We never had that. No other territory other than Tri-WF or WWF, WWE have that, where you can just go out the cage door, which, now they've done sort of that Von Erich thing to make it more interesting in terms of finish. But to see two guys in their mid-50s, Tolis and Blassie, have to climb up to the top, it was pretty dangerous for those old guys. Or Sheik. Ev, your thoughts on that? Do you like, because you guys started that trend, whatever year, 1978, when they finally allowed a cage match at Madison Square Garden, exiting through the door, or you?
I was used to it because that's what we had all the time, and what they would do is like the two guys would be both half out the door and struggling to get out the door, and one guy would have the other guy's ankle, and so they try to make it dramatic at least, and every so often one guy would just knock the other guy out the door accidentally, and the other guy would win. So I mean, they try to make it work, but
did Bruce ever climb up to the top of the cage? I don't think he would.
Patterson and Backlund climbed to the top of the cage. Patterson.
Backlund. Sure.
Yeah, that was one of the best cage matches we ever got there. Some of the cage matches were pretty forgettable. We had Tony Atlas and Jesse Ventura. It was really nothing special, and Backlund and Stan Hansen was a big disappointment. Some of the cage matches just.
But you were there for Morocco versus.
Morocco and Snuka was like the greatest thing ever, the greatest moment anyway, when Snuka leaped off the cage. That was amazing. And the flash cubes went off. For the young people who don't know what a flash cube is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was an incredible moment. And the roar afterwards, it was like a 5-minute roar after the fact. ROAR, not RAW. Raw. It was unbelievable to be there, and I saw Brody and Bruno in a cage, and believe it or not, Brody and Hansen were like kids at the time in '76, and it didn't have the same gravitas. It wasn't as big a deal.
To turn into that, it's so funny because he came straight to Tri-WF for Vince Sr. from Bruiser's territory in St. Louis, because Dick the Bruiser was he was a close, worker and friend to Sam Munchnick, that Brody had to be King Kong Brody, couldn't be Bruiser Brody there. So I think maybe, when he came back, so I'm guessing Vince Sr. might have named him that, again with the first letter, first name and last name, that's the same. Like Hulk Hogan, that name Vince Sr. created. I bet he created the name Bruiser Brody, because when Brody then went back, he wasn't able to use that name. He was back to being stuck with King Kong Brody in St. Louis and Bruiser's WWA territory, a few other places. So it's weird having several. Because that's a major name, Bruiser Brody. But yeah, and I don't think they were that impressive. Did you see when you saw them at that point, and that's when kind of Putski was there, and they were facing him a lot, and even Jose Gonzalez was there. That weird time.
I saw Brody wrestle Gonzalez at the Nassau Coliseum. You never would have dreamt what would have happened years later,
But did you think when you saw young Brody and Hansen that these guys are going to become total legends? Were you thinking that at all?
No. In fact, it was the opposite. They came in right after Billy Graham, Ivan Koloff, and Ernie Ladd, who were, some of the biggest stars of all time. And Ivan and Billy Graham both beat Bruno for the belt at different times. So it was almost a step down when a young Hansen and a young Brody came in, because this was pre-internet. The sheets weren't even big in the mid '70s. So it was like a step down. Like I had seen them on TV in various capacities. Brody on Florida TV, but he was Frank Goodish at the time. So we didn't even know him as Brody from the Florida TV that we saw in New York. And it was like, this isn't Ernie Ladd or Billy Graham or Ivan Koloff. So which is ironic because, Brody and Hansen became two of the greatest legends of all time. But at the time,
a period when you had, and I didn't appreciate it either. I thought just like you, this was a step down from those huge names and Don Leo Jonathan and all these amazing guys that were there. But you also had Skandor Akbar. You remember when he came in and Gilles Poisson from Montreal.
Louis Sia.
Yeah. And then these guys are elevated to main events, kind of. They didn't last very long at all. What did you think when those two guys came in? You read about them in the magazine.
We had guys like you just mentioned, Skandor Akbar, Louis Sia, Strong Kobayashi even. I mean, they weren't Billy Graham, Ivan Koloff, or Ernie Ladd again. So they weren't that. They were more mid-card guys, and they didn't get that mega push. Some of them got main events in other arenas, not at Madison Square Garden, but they weren't the highest level guys. And Putski beat Skandor Akbar in like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and you could see he wasn't getting that big push. And
speaking about the legends and the pushing, how about this like retroactive push of The Undertaker, and now, people saying now that he's a top 10 wrestler of all time, and especially, when wrestlers get around their retirement, people tend to, extra elevate like what they've done. So they can say, oh, well, Triple H, top 10 wrestler of all time. The Undertaker, top 10 wrestler of all time.
Neither of those guys would break my top 25, and probably wouldn't break my top 50. But then again, I'm watching it 50 years, and some of the fans saying this have been watching it 10 or 15 or 20 years, so they don't have the reference point. But I saw Undertaker wrestle Ric Flair live on a house show. It was nothing special. It wasn't Flair and Steamboat. It wasn't Flair and Terry Funk. It was an okay match. I mean,
Undertaker Bret Hart. When I saw that live, that was one of the best matches I saw live.
Okay, but that doesn't make him the greatest of all time.
No, he doesn't.
Did you not go to when Roy Shire retired, January of '82? He already knew that Vern was coming in to the Oakland Arena. That's where he was going to station himself. And then Vince Jr., that was his first sort of territory war thing, coming to the Cow Palace. So the two places that Shire, part of his arsenal, he's retiring. And that's why he went and exposed the business to the newspapers, the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle. He co-hosted my TV show a zillion times. And he said, I did it to F it up, as I knew Vern and Vince were coming in. So did you not go to see Vern Gagne cards? They were a lot better. A lot of the matches were
Pro Wrestling USA. We got at the Meadowlands in New Jersey, and
that Russ, because he's saying how great this Taker match is, and I'd say, well, I would put that against what I saw Vern coming into Northern California with, where he had Pat. The only place Pat in any AWA arena would be a face, against Hogan, and Pat was able to carry Hogan to 3 straight matches that were watchable. And there were a lot of other great stuff. And Brody and Hansen came in and did some tag stuff on Vern Gagne, California, Northern California.
I went to the AWA stuff mostly in the early to mid 80s. So I didn't get to see a lot of the.
Didn't you get to see Brody and Hansen on those shows? And
I did see Brody on one show. And Hansen on one show.
Some of those shows I thought were far better than the WWF house shows.
I saw a Pro Wrestling USA show where Brody was
Yeah.
in the second match against Steve O. And I'm like, what is this about? At the peak of Brody's fame, you know, it's like Vern has him buried at the bottom of the card. Made no sense. No sense.
What was the best Pro Wrestling USA? Didn't they have a fairly decent blend of AWA and NWA early on? A Pro Wrestling USA.
Yeah, I enjoyed seeing Nick Bockwinkel and Larry Zbyszko for the AWA belt. They had that twice. Nick Bockwinkel wasn't a kid at the time, and he was still great, just great. It was a mixed bag. They would throw together 6-man tags, like just throw it together, 3 guys for no reason on each side. And there was some no-shows, and there was some disappointments and some substitutions. It was kind of a mishmash, honestly, but it was great to see a lot of guys we didn't usually see. And, you know, what they had Sergeant Slaughter and Ric Flair on top on one show, and that was a disappointment, believe it or not. And it was supposed to be like a dream match at the time, but it just didn't click for whatever reason. And
Sarge the face? In the face.
Yeah, so, yeah, he had just turned face. Yeah, in the AWA, he was a face. He wrestled Kamala on some of their shows and Billy Robinson, and they were all okay, but they weren't Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik.
You get to see Billy Robinson up there on those Pro Wrestling?
Yeah, Billy Robinson wrestled Slaughter, and
Jerry the King Lawler was on a number of those shows.
yeah, Lawler came in more on the undercard though, and
Bill Dundee. They had Bill Dundee and Jerry the King often as a tag team. You know,
I remember the AWA stuff. Yeah,
but Pro Wrestling USA was not as good as Prime Ring of Honor with Nigel McGuinness and all those guys, and Pro Wrestling USA was certainly not as good as the NWA, you know, in Philly and Baltimore, and you know, it was a mixed bag, honestly.
And
so,
Eddie Horn, who fronted the money for the IWA in the mid-'70s, that was his first of 2 attempts to take down Vince Sr. And that was nothing but packed talent. I think I told you this a million times. That first of the 3 Roosevelt Stadium shows in Jersey, because Einhorn could not get Madison Square Garden as he tried, it was blocked out by Senior. In the back, who just came to sort of check on what was going on. They weren't part of the show, and not all of them were wrestlers. Sam Munchnick, the Sheik, Johnny Powers, who came with Antonio Inoki, just to check out what was going on.
Right.
And Ricky Starr and Thez came, and they were just thrown onto the show, and then Thez became an integral part of it. I'm talking the original ballet 60s Ricky Starr. Just packed. Igor, you remember that, Ev. Bulldog Brower, Moskers was the champ. They just put the title on him. They never even had
I think he still has it.
He still has it, yeah.
I saw the IWA in New York at the Beacon Theater, which is more famous as a concert hall, and they had Ernie Ladd and Victor Rivera on top. That was a hell of a match.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in that post WrestleMania hangover. I wonder what's big coming up.
If it's who they're going to pair Cody Rhodes with now, and I think he's going to have because they have to keep the title on Roman until The Rock. Cody's going to have some feud with Roman for probably at least 2 pay-per-views, maybe 3. That's the big thing.
I heard Reigns is going to wrestle Nakamura.
I think he already did.
Does anyone think Nakamura has even the slightest chance in hell of winning the title?
Not even Nakamura's kids, brother, sister, mom, or dad. Yes. Yeah.
It's sad. It's sad to put together a title match where you don't even think, like, for 1 second someone has a chance of actually.
You know how they have Happy Corbin? They should have neutered Nakamura. That'd be a good gimmick.
Well, Cody's going to have a feud with somebody else. I forget if it's going to be Kevin Steen. And then later this year, he'll, eventually lose, and that'll just keep Roman's title reign intact until next WrestleMania.
Here's the thing with Roman. I sincerely like him. The Shield were awesome. I'm a fan. But they painted him into a corner because it's very clear he's the new John Cena. He's Vince's boy. He's not going to lose. He beat Seth Rollins at the Garden in 5 minutes, the last card. He just beat Brock Lesnar again. So those guys are done. You know, Finn Balor, that was a joke. And Nakamura is certainly not going to beat him. So who's he got? He's got maybe Cody. It's very clear that Drew McIntyre, even though the guy's great and he's a huge guy, he was in the second match at WrestleMania. He's not pushed on that level.
He already dropped. Remember, a couple of years ago, they had title versus. Well, they were just not a title versus title, but they were both the two respective, the Universal and the WWE champion, and Roman beat him clean, and it was a forgettable match.
Yeah, WWE itself are pushing him now as the quote greatest of all time, and then every chance they get. He's been champion 896 days or whatever. They're pushing him like unbelievably. So the point is, unless it's The Rock, unless it's some unbelievable hot act that they have, nobody has credibility against them. Nobody. Will Smith is going to have to come in and slap him. You know, the Usos are going to have to jump him. They're going to have to do something dramatic because there's not a single contender out there that has any credibility. So
listen to this, and I know we're close to ending the show. There is talk of having finally an intergender match, which would have stiffs, couldn't hit in the face. Charlotte against Randy Orton, possibly at some point later this year.
Why would we need to see that? Why would we need to see a Randy Orton Charlotte match?
Well, because they're running out of ideas. So
Yes. You know, what are we going to have another blindfold match, you know, for a title? Maybe that would be a great idea.
The worst.
Bring back the gobbledygooker.
Is having your hand tied behind your back match, which is really...
No, the blindfold match was worse. That was...
Wait, they had when both were blindfolded. That was...
Right. That was when Jake the Snake and Rick the Model Martel had to, you know...
No, they've done that more recently, like 4 years ago. They had one of those.
Oh my God!
Always the drizzling shits. Sorry to curse. It's bad.
Yeah, because nothing improves the quality of wrestling than having both wrestlers not be able to see each other.
Well, they should blindfold the viewers and do it.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And elevate the women. You have all these incredible people. Bring. Bailey will be back, and Asuka. Get them involved. Get them in some main events because
I'd like to see Bailey against Osmos. Is that the guy's name? Amos.
Oh yeah.
Bailey and Amos. That would be a good match.
Please, that guy sucks. Put him back down. He should have gone straight to developmental for a year and a half.
He's the new Khali. Basically, he's the new Dilip Singh. He's basically a guy who's there.
Why was Dilip better in our APW, and when he got to be Khali in WWF, he sucked. WWE sucked big time. He could not work. He was better used by Roland, etc. in APW, and then once he goes to the biggest company,
you want to know why? It's because a couple of years of consecutive knee injuries. And he had never developed his legs. He was always giant up top because he was taught to lift weights at an early age, and that's all he was programmed to do. But he never worked on his legs, and so he kind of had Tony Atlas syndrome. And his legs were too small for his upper torso, and so he really couldn't do the running and the wrestling requires a strong leg base to be able to pull it off. A lot of people think that it's all about upper body strength, but if you don't have good legs in wrestling, your career isn't going to last for very long. Because
I'd like to see Roman Reigns against Doudrop. She's got powerful legs.
If you're going to do an intergender match,
match for you. Yeah. Well, we better wrap, or at least I've got to go. We better But I don't know. So yeah, I would rather see the spinners and stylistics.
That's right. So would I.
What do we have to look forward to? Without WrestleMania, and there's not going to be another pay-per-view.
We've got GCW, we've got Ring of Honor. We'll see where they go. Even Impact has been pretty exciting with all that New Japan talent. It's pretty damn good. There's a lot.
I would like to see AEW and New Japan, maybe Impact, Ring of Honor, all together, do a super show, like a stadium show like WrestleMania, and show that they're absolutely capable of filling a huge venue and putting on a far better show than WWE. And it would just quiet some of the naysayers down because, it doesn't need to be a war. Like I said, night one of WrestleMania was excellent. I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. It doesn't have to be us against them, AEW against WWE. The more good wrestling, the more competition, the more places for these guys to work. It's fine. WWE can do what they want. They want to have giant mouse traps. Let them have giant mouse traps. But AEW could put on, great wrestling with New Japan if they choose to, and make a lot of money, So that's what I'd like to see. And Chris Jericho said the same thing. He said that publicly. We're due for a super show. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
In the summer, when it's
have it here in Northern California though.
Wherever,
They're always doing New York and LA. They have it here in the Bay Area.
They do New York in bad weather for some reason.
Actually, AEW debuts in LA for the very first time June 1st.
So I hope it's a big success because maybe they'll do more West Coast shows.
It sold out in like a matter of minutes. That's at the LA Sports Arena where you saw WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So it's just a TV taping though, right?
It's just a Wednesday. No, it's a Wednesday live, and they're doing that Friday live in. It's about 2 hours from LA, Ontario, where the Motor Speedway is. So they're actually doing the Friday show, Rampage, live that Friday. So there'll be the Dark and Elevation on the Wednesday show, I'm sure.
Well, I hope it's a big show so that they can have some more stuff on the West Coast, because I always feel we're left out from that sort of thing. Anyway, folks, that's it for this week's show. Thanks a lot. It was great to have you all both back on. And
I'm gonna put on my bunny slippers and watch the last 5 years worth of Raw, so I get a good night's sleep.
Sleepy Wendy Chu, guilty pleasure. She's great. She's a lot of fun.
And I got to catch up with the Young Rock now that it's back on and catch what, because now they're actually getting to the point where he's actually a wrestler. The Rock is learning how to wrestle.
Take all of that stuff with a grain of salt, because none of those wrestlers work for Leah Maivia, so whatever.
No, but there's
it's an entertainment show, but it has no basis on reality.
I'm sure some of the things happen to The Rock, but he's embellishing it by, throwing in guys who weren't actually
the only thing that is actual, at least where he's not wrestling, but the grandmother, Leah, is that she then got sued, got all this trouble, and then had to flee Hawaii and move in with Rocky and Ada in Florida, Miami.
Well, we'll see when the show gets to that. But anyway, great to have you guys this week. We'll see you all next week. Thank you very much, folks. Good night.